Hello, and welcome to another episode of Five Alarm Task Force. If you're watching the video, if you're listening to the audio, well, you heard our introduction at the beginning. My name is Steve Green. I'm your host. Happy to be here with you. Happy to have you here with us. And I am so pleased to bring my guests for today back to the show. We kind of grew together. We found each other. One was up in the panhandle of Florida. One was on the west coast of Florida. And they met and they became friends. I think it was really at the Great Florida Fire School, wasn't where you guys met? Yeah.
Yep.
We were all there together that first time, I think in 2017. And we kind of just hit it off, and I was telling them about the podcast, and they came on and they were great guests. And then they went off and started their own podcast, but they were kind enough, respectful enough to come to me and say, look, we want to do the podcast, but we're not ready to do it on our own. Could we do it with you maybe like once a month and have our guests? And I said, yeah, why not? That'd be great. And that's the way they started. And then they went off on their own. It's like, the birds leaving the nest. And I couldn't be proud of my two guests, Nick Peppard and Sean Duffy. And you guys still have the podcast, right? Yep.
We do.
It's called Make Do.
Yeah.
And they're going to talk to you about it a little bit, but here's a brief intro to the concept. Here is the fact. Approximately 80% of America's firefighters serve in suburban departments. Sure, they might work in what's legally called a city. When you think about urban firefighting, we think FDNY, my hometown of Boston, Chicago, Pittsburgh, Philly, and many more. But most of us are not in cities that large. We may be close to one, but it still means we are suburban firefighters. Sure, we have mixed usage, residential, industrial, commercial, yada, yada. You may even have a high rise of 2 or 3. So what is the difference? The difference is that our departments, including career, volunteer, part pay, etc., certainly do not have the funding or the number of personnel that our urban brothers and sisters have. If they call a box, they will probably have 2 to 3 engine companies, 2 trucks, maybe even a tiller, platform, quint, heavy rescue, rehab bus, and much more. Does your department, not counting mutual aid, have that much support when you strike a box for a working call? Well, probably not. And that's why I wanted to bring these great firefighters back, Nick Peppard and Sean Duffy. So gentlemen, number one, thank you for making time out of very busy schedules to join me again. It's hard to believe it's been 3 years since we were last together, just before the pandemic broke. But I've admired you guys, what you've done. You've relocated everything, your families, to different parts of the country, but you're still dedicated to the concept of make do. So Nick, let's start with you and tell us a little about your background and what brought you to make do, and let's go from there.
Sure. Thanks for having us back on the show, Steve. In a nutshell, kind of grew up in the fire service in Florida, Northwest Florida. Came out of high school, didn't really know what I was going to do. Ended up figuring out that firefighting looked pretty cool. Started volunteering in the local combination department. Got hooked after going to a couple fires and went off to fire academy and was fortunate enough to get a job right out of fire academy. Worked in Florida for 17 years, teaching local fire academy there. Started doing some stuff with Sean a few years back, and kind of crossing paths at different conferences and whatnot. But been on the job a little over 18 years. Pretty much moved everything to Wisconsin, going on, almost 2 years now, a little over a year and a half, I guess. Made the big leap, took a lateral job up in Wisconsin, decided it was time for a quality of life move, change of life, change of scenery, change of just family dynamic. And it's been a whirlwind, but been very fortunate to do a lot of cool stuff with Sean, with other guys around the business, from podcasting to writing a couple articles, getting to teach us some pretty cool places. But just I love the job. I love spreading the good word, so to speak. And the podcast really was kind of one of those things that we kind of started talking on the phone a lot, and it was like, oh, we should record this sometime. And from those conversations on the phone came the concept to make do. We're like, hey, most of the fire service falls in this category of having to do more with less, having to figure out, even in the city environment, not having the resources a lot of times that your bigger urban systems have, and having to figure things out. So that's kind of where it was born, was we wanted to be able to share some insight and perspective uniquely from that limited staffing scenario, or I mean, even in your cities, like I said, they are fortunate to have the good staffing on the rigs. They don't necessarily have the depth of resources that you see in some of your big cities. So that started the podcast. We started with you, of course, under the Five Alarm Task Force label. After a few months, we decided to branch off and spread our wings and try it on our own. And I think we're up to 43 episodes in since we started just over 3 years ago.
That's great. It really is. And I'm really so proud of both of you, because you really jumped in, and the fact, I think, that you came to us to help. First of all, I felt it was an honor that you even considered doing that. And to me, it was really one of the things that I really wanted to do, was to help more podcasters talk about the fire service. I've had people say to me, why do you list all those other podcasts that are competing with you? I said, we're not competing. Nobody competes. We just talk. We're trying to teach. That's all we're doing. I'm happy to list 12, 13 other, 14 other firefighting podcasts. That's the way it should be. Sean, what about you? You recently made a big change as well, from the warm, breezy weather of Southwest Florida, and
Yeah.
a really tough battalion chief you had to work under, right?
Yeah.
One of the
Yeah.
biggest puppy dogs in the world, but who knows, more than I've ever forgotten, but a really nice guy, and that's Chief Blanchard.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It was a pleasure to work under him for the short time I got to, and he's living his best life now. He's retired, but um, yeah. Shortly after going to Venice and helping them with their ALS adventure, becoming an ALS fire department, I absolutely loved it there. I had all intentions of staying there and finishing out my career, but the one thing that I say, and I continue to say, is my family comes first, always and foremost. And even if that means that I need to leave the fire service to take care of them, like, that's what I'm going to do. So, my mother-in-law was really sick. She needed our help, and we just couldn't stomach the idea of having to put her in a nursing home. So we kind of came together as a family and said the best thing to do right now would be to all of the family be in one place, so that we can take turns, like, looking after her and giving her the care that she needed. So she unfortunately passed away, but that was expected. We knew that was going to happen. So being able to bring my wife back home and spend those last months with her mom was really important to me. So I took a job in a small department, two-station department, what they call Downriver, Michigan, in Wyandotte. And I had an opportunity to go to the city of Ann Arbor, which I had applied to many years before and got on a waiting list. So, everything comes full circle. So I've been in Ann Arbor almost 2 years now, and loving it. It's good. And even though that I have the word city in there, it's still very much the suburban mentality. The same struggles.
Sure.
As a city, we only have about 18 people on duty every day, including the battalion chief. So, as you know, like, that's not a whole lot of people to run the fire ground. So, we rely on mutual aid when needed, and if we get a fire in our city, the whole city's on it. So, we need to learn how to do a little bit more with less. So, this whole make do journey, that's really what it was about, was just telling people, hey, I've been there, working for larger fire departments, working for county fire departments, rural. Didn't matter where I was in my career. It was always that limited staffing model. And, it's in my opinion that those are probably some of the best firefighters that I've ever had the opportunity to work with, just because they have a well-rounded approach to the job, and the problems they face are a lot different. The fires are the fires, but when you don't have a bunch of people to throw at the problem, you have to be pretty creative with the solution. So in that environment, I think that it's worth talking about and what that looks like for everybody else. So it's been a good ride. Having a lot of fun with it, and hopefully it continues.
That's great to hear. And I think what you did personally really brings down who we are in our core as firefighters. And that is that as you said, our families come first. And sometimes part of that first is taking care of somebody in the family. And if we we're out taking care of strangers every day, but sometimes we're faced with turning it inward and taking care of our own family. And you're right. If we run to take care of strangers, by God, we're going to stop everything we do and take care of family. And that has to come first. And I think also I would be remiss if I don't share with those of you who don't know that when we started the nonprofit in the midst of the pandemic, and we were looking for a good motto, it was our friend Sean Duffy here who came up with a motto that has resonated with the people that we have been able to help since we started, and that is our nonprofit corporate name is 5-Alarm Task Force Corp. And thanks to Sean, our motto is one family, one mission, first responders helping each other. And we make sure that with every check that we've sent out, we've contributed almost $6,000 so far. I'd say 95% of that has gone to families of brothers who made the ultimate sacrifice. And when I send that cover letter out, that motto was on that cover letter as well, because I want them to see why we do what we do. And it's very important. And folks, if you want to help the nonprofit, and it's only one focus, we take care of our brothers and sisters. You can always visit our website at 5alarmtaskforcecorp.org and just scroll down to the photo of that beautiful silver Q2B siren. Click on that and the donation page will come right up. So, gentlemen, what I want to do this morning is let's talk about where Make Do is and the buy-in that you guys have seen over the past several years. Both of you have been all over the country on training, speaking, teaching situations. So what's your feedback? What are you guys seeing from the efforts you've worked so hard to do so far? Okay, not both of you at the same time.
I can't speak for Nick. I know that I've personally had a lot of people reach out and say that the podcast in itself has helped them through some issues that they were facing in their departments. It's also helped motivate them to do better. And I don't know if I can take credit for that, honestly. And I truly don't want to, because the purpose for me is just to have a platform, right? Like we just bring on guests and we just talk about what's going on in the fire service on a particular topic. And, I give my experiences, Nick will give his experiences, and it's really just about the conversation, right? And hoping that somebody could take something out of that conversation, which I think they have over the past couple of years. I know some people have been inspired to start podcasts of their own after listening to ours, which is amazing to hear. So again, I don't want to take credit for any of that. I think all those individuals had it inside of them the whole time. Maybe they just needed to know that they weren't alone and that it was possible for them to do whatever they needed to and reach their goals as well.
Nick?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I would say every few weeks, I get feedback from somebody, whether it's via messenger or running into somebody. I'm actually surprised how many folks in the local area listen. People I'd never would expect, even in my own department, that will say stuff about an episode, and it's just kind of like kind of interesting to hear feedback, obviously, from various sources, but all of it's been pretty positive. Guys got a lot of good things to say. People feel like it motivates them, helps them kind of stay focused. And, we've been pretty fortunate. Like Sean said, I mean, we're not going to take credit for the people that have been helped. I mean, I think some of the guests that we've had on the show, have been pretty outstanding. I mean, the guys that have been on the show are super knowledgeable guys. They have a lot of background in most cases, far more than my background in the fire service, way more experience. So, but it's cool because we got a good blend. We got a good blend of everything from rural, suburban, some big city guys here, here and there sprinkled in, but the emphasis always gets spun back around on, hey, how do we apply this to, limited staffing? How do I make my own firehouse better? And there's a lot of stuff that translates well across the platform that we have. And I don't know, it's been a journey. I mean, it's just it's like sitting at the kitchen table and talking. Most of our stuff's very unscripted. Anybody that's listened to it can vouch for the fact that we chase several rabbit trails per episode. But it's always in good fun. We have a good time with it. And, I think that's what makes it so impactful, from what I've heard people, giving us feedback is it's just like sitting at the table talking and we're just having a conversation. There's no, we're not super polished in the sense of like, oh, it's got to go down this list of stuff, that we got to talk about. If we get to it, we get to it. If we don't, we don't. There's times we have an idea coming in, like we'd like to talk about this and that, and we talk about more of that than this. So it's just kind of, very organic in that sense. And like I said, I think the guests a lot of times make for good conversation. We have a very different bunch of people that come in from everything from truck to engine to, personal stuff in your own life. One of the episodes I can tell you that we got a lot of feedback from was episode with Mike Galliano talking about marriage and family stuff. And you would think like that wouldn't be a super popular topic in the fire service, bunch of bravado and tough guys. And I can't tell you how many people we had, reach out and like, man, that like hit me like right in the chest. And I've listened to it a couple times. And I mean, I've had numerous people say, man, like this helped me kind of get back on track, put my family first. And Sean and I both make a point, to really emphasize like, hey, you got to take care of your family. And Sean said it at the beginning, family first. And, I think it's easy in this line of work to forget that. And so I think that's the part that I think really makes it, special too, is that there's always kind of a focus on, what's best for them, the citizens, but also what's best for the family and talking about those type of things. So it's not just tactics and strategies and sexy firefighting stuff. It's personal stuff too that, people are dealing with, whether it's at home or in their firehouse, the cultural stuff. And so I think that wide palette of information and feedback from people from all over the fire service, from north, south, east, west, and everywhere in between, just kind of, from what I've heard, people really enjoy that. They enjoy the wide variety, and they enjoy the very raw conversations sometimes.
Right. And I think you brought up a very good point, which is that, there are a lot of podcasts out there about the fire service. And each one kind of looks to find its niche. But I think what you guys have done, and I'm really, again, have to, not to overstate how proud I am of you, is the fact that even when we first met and we first started talking with each other, I already saw your commitments just through our conversation to family and the fire service. It wasn't the fire service and my family. It was family and the fire service. I remember we were in Fort Myers, and you were showing me the picture of your kids that first time we met. And you weren't showing me a photo of a burned building you knocked down the fire. You didn't knock on or anything like that. You showed me a picture of your kids. And I would say that if every firefighter, male or female, married, unmarried, carried with them a picture of those important to them, and that's what they start their day with. This is for you. This is why I do what I do. And then you go out and do your job. And that would share the same thought process that you guys do. And that is, yes, we have jobs to do, and we want to do it to the best of our ability with the best information we can gather. But everything starts with our family, and that's where, because if it wasn't for our families who support us, we couldn't be firefighters. It takes a special family to understand that they're the father or the mother or the son or the brother, sister are firefighters and what it takes to do that job. And again, whether you're in a little rural community or you're in a big city, you can never be, if you have a family of any kind, then you have to understand that's your starting point. Should be every day. My starting point is I love my family, and I do this job so I can help them.
Yeah, that's spot on. And I would say to anybody who doesn't think that's true, or maybe they've been given bad advice, like when I first started the fire service, my first officer, I was 18 years old, and he gave me some terrible advice. Like it was bad. He said two things to me. One, um, if whoever you're with doesn't support you and your job, then you don't need to be with that person. Two, if you ever get married, just understand that I think everybody should go through a divorce at least one time. And I just remember him saying that. I was like, wow, that's crazy. And for some reason, maybe I didn't notice it or whatever. Like I didn't really seem to see much family photos in people's lockers and things. But the longer I went in my career, the more I realized like if you just stop and pay attention, like a large majority of us have pictures of our wives, pictures of our loved ones, our children, whatever, in our lockers, but also underneath our helmet, right? So when you take your helmet, you put your helmet on, you're taking it off, like that's the first thing you see. And I think there's some value to that and a true testament of like, although people can consider us like selfless servants, whatever you want to call it, um, the mission is always about the family, like your family. That's your biggest support group, right? So I'm not going to speak for every firefighter out there, but what I can tell you is like, I know that I can't do what I do without my family standing behind me. So it's important that I honor that. And I know like that I am the person I am and I am the firefighter I am because of those individuals, nobody else. And, you know, I love seeing that when you walk in and everyone's lockers are open and you see their families and stuff because that opens up conversation, right? Like it's more personal at that moment. You know, you realize like, hey, we have a job to do, but like everybody's going to go back to their families. But you also get to say, take that moment before the start of your shift. Hey, man, how's the wife and kids? Everybody going good? Or, hey, you know, your son's really getting big or, you know, whatever that conversation sparks, it all starts around family. And to me, I think when those conversations happen, it just carries out through the day. And most of the conversations at some point revolve back into your family, right? Or their family, like what's going on in your lives and things like that. So it is definitely an integral part of what we do. And I don't want to see that be overlooked ever.
Right. And that's a good point. I know that when I joined that volunteer department in North Carolina, and I took once I got the app, I told the chief I have to sit down and talk with my wife about it. We didn't have any kids then. We were only married a couple of years. And I said to her, I said, you know, are you okay with this? If I do this, I don't know what it's going to entail, but you know, it means answering calls. She goes, yeah, as long as you're, you know, be as careful as you can, and this is what you want to do it. And, you know, I'll support you. And, you know, I'd come home from calls and plectrons in those days. That shows everybody how old I really am. But she'd come home. I said, listen to the call. She goes, I tried, but I couldn't understand the thing anybody was saying there because this was in North Carolina and she's from upstate New York and Albany. And she wasn't used to the drawl. And I said, well, didn't you hear about she was like, I understand the word fire, but I couldn't understand basically anything else anybody was saying on the radio. I said, but honey, you know what? You listen. And that was what was important to me. So I think that if we don't use our family as not only our jumping off point, but our return point as well, that's what keeps us kind of balanced. And I think that if we remember that, and there are times as we all know, and of course we're making, in this season, which probably will be the last season of the podcast. We're 8 seasons already. It's been a long time, and I love doing what I'm doing, but you can't beat a dead horse either. We have some great guests still coming up, but I know that this never would have happened without my wife saying, okay, you do this, because I'm at work every day teaching, but you're home, you're disabled, and let's do something that's going to make you feel good. And I said, well, what do I do? She goes, well, you're talking about that podcast, just go ahead and do it and try it and see where it takes you. Without her telling me that, I probably would never have even started it. And the same thing that you guys said, just giving back. That's what this has been about from day one, just getting people who know a lot more than I do, because I've been out I've been out longer than most of you guys have been in. Most of our listeners have been in. But if it wasn't for her saying, do something that's going to make you feel good again about this. That's like when Joe brought me down to the very first, that first year, 2017. And he just said, you take some pictures for some videos. And I said, sure. And he came to me, I remember on Tuesday, and he put his arm around me in the lobby of that Holiday Inn. He says in my ear, you feel like a firefighter again? I said, yeah, I do. He goes, good. That's why I brought you down here, because I wanted you to have that feeling again. And that was it. I mean, that was like a boost of vitamin for me, and really got me interested in making this the best podcast I could. And that's the same thing you guys did with Make Do. You started off here, and put the seed in the soil, gave it a little water, fed it, and now here you are 3 years later, even though you've moved around the country, you're still doing the podcast, still getting that message out that so many people either can't hear, won't hear, or they don't want to hear. Because if you don't, as in the fire service, if you don't face your realities of what it's going to be in your area, your department, your neighboring departments, if you don't look at that broad picture and just think you can paint a picture of just your little firehouse and everything happens there, that's not going to work. And you guys are out there trying to show that we may not be Philly, we may not be New York or LA City or LA County, but we can still have a damn good fire department and do a great job for our communities. And I think that's what I've seen all along with Make Do. And I've listened to the podcast. I've listened to some of your mixed podcasts with friends like Assistant Chief Jacob Johnson and Jason Liska. And, listening to you guys, shoot the breeze about what we love and what we do, in and of itself is educational. And I think that's what I'm so proud about for where you guys have gone with this. Because, I don't know, I guess most of the trades don't really address this particular topic. I've been reading the trades for a long time and reading the news blasts every day. But I really don't see this topic come up much on the trades or on the websites. And I think that what you guys are doing is not only great work, but I think it's so important. And as we talked about before we start recording, is that the fire service, we're a little bit of a tight wad right now, because so many departments are short on personnel. They're changing assignments, numbers on responding apparatus that they never ever thought about before. They always thought they could do full responses, but they can't. And getting new people in is difficult. And it's not just on the volunteer side. We're seeing it on the career side. A lot of departments are doing these special programs to bring new people in. So I think what we'll do is maybe we'll take a quick break here. When we come back, let's talk about your message of why the concept of make do is so important, more so today than it was even when you guys started 3 years ago, because the whole view has changed since 2019. And of course, the pandemic had a great deal to do with it. And it's still having ripple effects. It's not over and done with, but I think the results of it are still something that we're going to be dealing with for quite a while. So folks, we're going to take a break here. If you're watching the video, you won't see anything different. If you're listening to the audio, well, we're going to take a little break. We'll have a few public service announcements for the fire service, and then we'll be back with our guests, Nick Peppard and Sean Duffy, as we talk about make do, what it means and what we do with it. We'll be back right after these words. As always, please stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to this episode of Five Alarm Task Force. My guests today are returning guests, great firefighters, great family people. Great family people. If you missed that first segment, you want to go back and listen to it and see why I stress these two gentlemen are great family people. But before we get back to them, I want to remind you that the North Florida Fire Expo is coming up. It is an affordable, unapologetically blue-collar fire conference for firefighters who are hungry to learn and improve. Our mission is to passionately pursue excellence through authentic blue-collar training. Come celebrate our 5th year anniversary, February 7th through 10th, 2024, on the beautiful beaches of Okaloosa Island in Florida. For more information, check out the website, www.northfloridafireexpo.com. We'll put this in the show notes as well, but this is what Nick and Sean also work towards. Besides the families, besides the work they do in their departments, this is something they believe in. And here they are, 5 years down the road for their 5th one. So if you haven't been there, and believe me, I was supposed to teach at the first one. Unfortunately, I got sick and I wasn't able to be there, but I've heard feedback from it. If you want just a real down basic, I want to learn conference, it's not gigantic, but boy, they have great presenters. There is a lot of good stuff to be learned. And there's the camaraderie of meeting other firefighters from around the country and just talking shop. And sometimes we learn a lot more just sitting at a table or at the bar talking shop than we do in 6 hours of classes. Because sometimes we need that reality check of what life really is about, not what we think it's about. So you'll hear this again later on, but we'll have it in the show notes for you as well, folks. So joining me again are Nick Peppard and Sean Duffy, and they created the website, the podcast called Make Do. And it was about the fact that 80% of us in this country deal in basically what we call suburban protection. Yes, we have mixed uses, but we're not big urban fire departments. We don't have the assets that big departments have. Sure, it's great to see them on TV and say, oh man, boy, would I love to be with all that. But few of us are, and we have to make do. So where are we, guys? 5 years down, well, 3.5 years down the line, 4 years down the line from the birth of Make Do. Where are we today with getting your message out and how people accept it and see the difference between, are they still dreaming that they were in that big department, or are they really beginning to grasp that we're not going to have those kind of assets show up other than through mutual aid?
Yeah. Personally, I like what Mark Von Appen says. Why you're a firefighter is more important than where you're a firefighter. And that message, really, I think, resounds with a lot of people. The podcast is very much geared towards, people that want to learn, but also, I think the show is a nice balance of like technical and tactical stuff, but also the personal stuff as well. It's we want to keep it real, and we want to keep it relative, and we want to keep it relatable, right? We want people to be able to listen to the show and say, man, I can use this on my job right now. I can go back and apply this to my crew, to my department, to the situations I'm in. And I think that's what's really, been the resounding theme. And, it's not that we have all the answers, because we don't. But we have real raw conversations with professionals from all over this great fire service. And they provide insight. We give feedback. It's like, again, very organic, sitting at the kitchen table at the firehouse having a conversation type of conversations, but it's got enough, technical information and tactical information to help them on that aspect. But also, we try to keep it light. We try to keep it enjoyable, where you're getting a blend. You're getting a blend of the personal stuff. You're getting a blend of the tactical stuff. And people relate to that. People listen to that and they say, hey, this is something that I'm learning, I'm entertained, and it's stuff that every once in a while gets in the feels. Every once in a while it hits those topics that kind of catch you in the crosshairs. And I think, like, I don't know that we set out necessarily to, we're not chasing numbers. It's really just like Sean said, it's a platform to share our passion and things, that we've experienced along the way with other people, and pick their brains. And I mean, I can tell you right now, I have notes. Every episode we do, I'm jotting stuff down as guys are talking, because we're learning too, right? And that's the beauty of it, is it's not just us spewing a bunch of stuff that we think or know. Although we do share our insights and our experiences, but we're gleaning stuff from other people as well. And in that dynamic, I think that's just it's a good dynamic for other people to learn too, because they're hearing feedback from big departments, small departments, rural, issues, volunteer issues, and that's the thing. Like, if you listen to the show long enough, you'll notice that a lot of our guests have varied backgrounds. And even guys that are in bigger departments now cut their teeth in suburban settings and have, those insights that they can provide. And I think, like, when it comes down to it, as we are wrapping up the end of season 3 here next month, it really is, I mean, it's just very much a blue collar podcast. I mean, it's nothing flashy. We don't have any cool special effects. I mean, I'm not the most technologically savvy guy. I mean, I've figured a few things out, but nothing like some of these guys have amazing setups at the studios and all the fancy equipment and all the sound effects and stuff. And I'd like to get there one day, but I mean, for us, it's just an outlet, a healthy outlet for us to be able to share some passion and hopefully help somebody else along the way. And that's what it's been. It's been organic from the beginning, and it's kind of stayed that way over the last few years. I mean, Shaw can weigh in on it, but I mean, that's what we're looking for. We want to make it where it's real and it's relatable, and we're giving relative information to the current state of the fire service. Again, people in those limited staffing scenarios, or smaller departments sometimes think that, oh, I'm not, a real firefighter like those guys at, Chicago or FDNY or whatever. I mean, but at the end of the day, like, the community expects them to be just as professional, just as prepared, and I would argue that in the suburban setting, if you really think about it, you have to wear a lot of hats. And that means you have to be training, I would say, more than the guys in the urban setting. They have, this is my job. I run the engine. I'm the plug man. Like, this is what I do, right? Or I'm the nozzle guy, or I'm the irons guy. I mean, in the suburban setting, you often have to shift gears. And so you kind of have to be constantly studying, training, trying to get better. And I think, like, that's been the emphasis from the beginning, is like, hey, you can make excuses or you can make do.
That's a great way of putting it. And I think I love what you said about bringing humanity to the fire service, because all too often we focus on tactics. Take the door this way, fast water this way, Don't do this that way. Do this that way. But if we forget about the humanity, nothing's going to happen. Nothing will happen with it. And we're not robots. Yeah, there'll be some robot firefighting coming along. We know that. We've seen some of the prototypes out there, and a lot of us probably saw that video of that animated that high rise fire in this some sort of a helicopter fire truck platform, has almost looks like a drone with 4 propellers coming. It brings it up the thing and puts out a bridge to get the people off. Then it has water tanks and spraying water into. That'd be wonderful. And we ain't going to see it, I don't think, in our time. That's for sure. But if you know in your community where your second plug is, not your first plug, where's the second hydrant? Because the first one's stopped up. I can't get any water from it. Where the hell do I go now? If you don't know that, something as simple as that, and tactics are right out the window, because we can't do that job without water. So sometimes we just have to realize, hey, let's take the simple side, and we can always build on it. But if we don't have a foundation, it's like with education. If you don't have a foundation, there's, same thing with a house. If you don't have a good foundation, you put all that wood up and the truss and everything like that, it may not hold because you don't have a good foundation. It's not even. It's tilted. But we need a good foundation, learning the basics first. Everything else can come after that. But if we don't dedicate ourselves to the basics and then to improve and always learn, and this is what we talked about way back when, is that, and we say this at the very end of our listing of the announcements of all the podcasts that we promote, is that to be a great firefighter, you always have to be willing to learn. And sometimes it doesn't mean you have to go to the biggest national conferences. You can go to a small regional conference. You can get together with another department that's in a neighboring community. And that's what you guys kind of share, is that you don't have to be in this big urban setting. You can do great work if you say, this is where we are, this is what we can do. How do we make ourselves better?
Yeah, I agree. And, when Nick originally approached me with the idea of doing this podcast, I was a little hesitant at first because my thing is like, well, who am I to have a podcast? Nobody cares about my views or anything. And my thing was like, hell, I'm still learning, right? Like I probably fail more than most people I know, but to me, it's in that failure where growth happens. And then I started thinking about it. I'm like, you know what? If we can have a platform that we can be open and honest with ourselves and with our guests, I think that's going to relate to our listeners, right? Because I don't want to say anything ill about any other podcast, because it's really not a negative thing, but it's just some of them are geared towards a specific topic, a specific thing, right? Where I felt the beauty in ours is that we do have the flexibility to talk about whatever we want. There's never really like a topic of like, hey, today we're going to talk about hose bundles or nozzles. Like we just don't do that. Like if that's where the conversation goes, it goes. And like I think everybody learns something from that, because I'll tell you, there's been some guests on where like I told Nick beforehand, I'm like, hey man, I'll get on the thing, but I don't have any experience in that. Like I don't know anything about this. I can't really have a conversation. But however, like being present and learning, you realize like, man, I have a little bit more experience maybe in that realm of things than what I thought. And I think that's because of being in that limited staffing environment. Like you don't have the option, right? When someone's looking at you to get things done, like it's get it done, and you do the best you can. And, sometimes it may work out in your favor, sometimes it may not. So I think keeping it in that realm of things and keeping egos out of it, and just having that open and honest conversation of realizing like nobody's claiming to be an expert here, right? Nobody's claiming to have the answers. We just want to have a conversation, because these conversations need to happen in the fire service, right? And often I think the frustration is like you can't have them within your own firehouse because there's too much conflict. And it's like, this doesn't need to be something that causes conflict. Like we should be able to have these even if we disagree with what's being said, like it should be said, right? Like these talks need to happen. It's essential for growth. So I think that's what makes the podcast what it is. And I think that's what the listeners appreciate the most about it, even though we can be long-winded and go for 2 hours or more sometimes. You know, I haven't met anybody who's listened to one of our episodes that says that was absolute crap. Like I didn't get anything out of that. And like Nick says, he takes notes. I take notes, and like I go back and I listen again. And every time I listen, I'm like, man, I'm not listening for any other fact that like I always want to pick up little nuggets that maybe I missed before. And sometimes you just don't get that. Like if you talk about like a conference setting or a conversation that we're having like this that's not recorded, you miss that ability to go, ah, crap, that person said something, and I really want to know what they said, or I want to reiterate that because it meant something to me. So having that timestamp for everyone to just go back and listen at their leisure, I think is definitely a benefit of these conversations.
Oh, absolutely. Without a doubt. And I think when I started this, and that was, I was being cajoled by Andy and Joe and the two Johns of New Jersey Johns, Dixon and Hayowick, who've all become, as you guys have become dear friends. Even at least I've had the chance to meet the two of you. I had the chance to meet the John and Joe, and I think that it's the humanity is what binds us as firefighters. I don't care male or female, doesn't make any difference. It's the humanity of who we are and what we do that gives us that connection. And yes, there are those in certain departments that just feel that they walk on a little step of air above everybody else. And that's just life. I don't care what business you're in. There are always going to be those people. But I think you're going to find that most of the time, the people that we talk with are grounded. And they're good people. They're trying to do the best they can in the service. And we do it because we love doing it. I don't think firefighting is a job that somebody says, let me see, it's between driving that dump truck and working for public works, or I could be a firefighter, whatever that means. This is a calling, and I think we all feel it. Anybody who has been a firefighter is a firefighter, or any branch of a first responder. We do it not because the job is easy. That's for damn sure. And I don't care if you're in a volunteer department or the big urban department, the job is never easy. As we say, we see crap that we don't want anybody else to have to see. But if we keep ourselves grounded, that, you know what, we walk with 2 feet on the ground like everybody else, and share our humanity, then we can talk. We don't always have to agree, but we can talk and discuss and hopefully learn from each other. And I know you guys probably also heard retired now Deputy Chief Kevin Burns, who was the deputy chief in my department where I grew up in. We were only 2 years apart, and I didn't even know him, 2 years apart in school. But once I brought him on the podcast a couple of times, and then when I got up to Boston, I was able to had lunch together. This was the town I grew up in, and I got to meet one of the leaders of the fire department of the town I grew up with, and that's why I learned to admire. I didn't plan on being a firefighter, but I just learned to admire them when they came to my house. We had a little woods fire behind our home, and everybody went running back to see when they pulled the reel line to knock it out. But I went down to the pumper and I met the engineer. He told me how the pump worked, gave me a lollipop. I was 7 years old. I was happy as a pig in his sty. So, and I just admired firefighters and made my parents drive me to every fire station in our community, and then rode my bikes around. And then when I had my license, drove around Greater Boston. And I think that taught me something that I didn't realize. I lived in suburban Boston, and we weren't rich by any means. We were just a typical middle class family, both parents working. But I saw that the firefighters I met were some of the nicest people I had met. And as I was getting older and meeting more of them, I liked them even more. I admired the men even more. And it just so happened that I fell into that opportunity when I took a job in North Carolina. It wasn't anything I planned. It just took the job, and that station was just half mile down the road from our apartment. And I stopped in one day to look at the fire trucks. Next thing I know, walk out with an application form. But I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change it. And yes, it created my disability, but I don't regret that. The only thing I regret is that I wasn't able to serve longer because I loved what I was doing. And I think that you guys have that passion, that here you're both up now in the cooler quarters of our country, not the coldest, but the cooler sections than when you were down here, but you still love what you're doing. Actually, you love the lifestyle where you are now. And sometimes when we make these moves, and because my civilian job took me on several moves, it's tough to get up and move every 2 to 3 years or 4 years to a new place, have to meet new people and stuff like that. But you guys have embraced where you are in your new departments and the people that you've met up there. And I think that shows the dedication. And I think a lot of our brothers and sisters share that with you two. I think most of us really care about the people we're with and the people we serve. That's what's important to us. We don't need to say, I invented this or I created this tactic. Most of us say, yeah, I learned that at a conference and it worked out really well. I remember, with you punching the doors, Sean. I mean, I remember hearing back at that at the Florida Fire School, what an amazing class that you did on punching the doors. And I said, wow, is it that big a deal to punch doors? And I spoke with DeVito about it, and he said, oh yeah, it's a whole new ball game today, what it is to get through a door sometimes. I had no idea because we really had those kind of doors in my time. But to me, the fact that you guys aren't looking for fancy stuff. It's like you said, Nick, it's simple, blue collar. Let's do this to make ourselves better, to serve our communities better. And we do it together as a team. And both of you share that philosophy. And I would just love to see that philosophy catch fire. I'd like to see that on social media. There are some good people on social media who really have some really great advice that's not necessarily tactics. It's about our lifestyle. And I think the fact that on Make Do, you guys aren't focused just on tactics. It's like you said, we come together and we talk about what's important for us or for our guests, and then we riff off that. And that's the way I think we all learn better. But it starts with the fact, and that's why I was so proud of you when you guys launched it, was that you weren't satisfied with the status quo. You wanted to help improve what you could for the vast majority of firefighters who find themselves in the same situation, that we're just suburban firefighters. Yeah, we have some big challenges in our communities, but we have to work together to make it work. And if we can't work together, if we can't get along and work together as partners and comrades, then we won't serve the people, we won't serve the community. And if we're not doing that, that's not good. And people will get the wrong idea of who we are and what we do. No, we don't play sitting around in front of the bay doors playing checkers anymore. But there are still people, and I've heard it, who still think that's what firefighters do. They don't answer many calls, many calls. Well, yeah, our fire load calls are down, but everything else is skyrocketing. And, we used to be a fire department that had a rescue truck, and now we're an EMS department that has a fire truck. And that's another challenge we have to face today, because that's the reality. That's who we are, and we still have to serve the community. And sometimes we have to change our whole philosophy of that department to say, look, the people are crying out that they need this. And the city fathers and mothers, that's what they say that we need. So we have to sit down and discuss it as a fire department. Can we do this? And is this what we want to be able to do? Every department has to make their own decision. We can't sit here and tell anybody what to do, because we don't know the situation. And I think sometimes people accept tactics too broadly. They think if it works in the big city, it's got to work for us. So we have to adopt that. There have been plenty who found out that doesn't work that way, because there's a lot more that big city has that you don't have. So yeah, the exercise is a great exercise. And I'm sure you guys have seen this at the conferences, is that when push comes to shove, though, it doesn't always work the same way for the smaller department as it does for those real big departments. So how have you, I'm trying to put this really polite way. So you've talked about some of the feedback you get, real positive feedback. Have you heard people with not so positive feedback because you're not all tied up in tactics every single episode and teaching how to do something better than anybody else?
I personally have
Oh, here you go.
been, for the most part, on my end of things, it has always been positive. Thank you for that conversation, or, hey, I didn't think I needed this, like whatever the case is. I think the approach to how we do the podcast is pretty simple. It's, you can do the job without loving it, but you can't love the job without doing it. So it's really geared for those passionate individuals that remember where they came from and why they became firefighters in the first place, fighting against the complacency of people who seem to have like lost their way. So yeah, I'm sure, maybe sometimes or sometime that will happen. And that's okay. People are free to their opinion, but as of now, I haven't seen anybody comment or personally been told any of that. So
That's good to hear. Nick?
Yeah, I'll just echo what Sean said. The feedback that I've seen has been positive. So I don't think we've had, if there are people that don't like it, they're not telling us. And I mean, at the end of the day, I get it. Everybody's got different flavors. We kind of cater to the group that is hungry, wants to learn, is into the job. I mean, I know the episodes run a little long sometimes, but it's one of those things where people know what they're getting when they listen. It's pretty sensitive conversations usually with our guests. I mean, we have them on. It's one of those things where we're going to talk about what we feel like talking about, and what they feel like talking about, and chase a few rabbit trails. And but at the end of the day, the goal is to be better and to make others better. And I think people appreciate that. The people that do listen. And maybe that, maybe if we were a little flashier and kept things to a certain topic and, cut it down to shorter segments, maybe we'd have more, numbers for listeners or whatever. But at the end of the day, I think the people that do listen and follow are pretty, consistent, it seems like. And I'm fine with that. I mean, again, it's not about chasing likes on YouTube or, trying to get so many millions of subscribers. I mean, it's very much a grassroots effort, and people spread the word by word of mouth. And we don't do a ton of advertising. We don't do a ton, everything's very organic in that sense. And I like it like that. To me, it's we're very much just kind of like, hey, word of mouth. If you liked it, if you enjoyed the podcast, share it with your coworkers, share it with your brothers and sisters on the job or neighboring departments, and we've kind of grown that by by natural methods. We don't have a massive budget. We're not putting stuff out on the interwebs all the time. I mean, yeah, we got some cool stickers. That's about the extent of our swag, but yeah, it's been good. It's honestly, I think the people that like it really like it, and we haven't heard it. Like I said, if people don't like it, I guess they don't listen. I don't know, but
Yeah, I feel the same way. People said, well, shouldn't you do this and shouldn't you do that? And I said, no, because I let my guests talk. I've only done, I think, 2 episodes out of more than 220 over the years that I was the only one on it, and I was just talking about something personal about me and what I went through. But everything else has been with guests, whether it's 1 guest or 3 guests. And somebody said, well, in the education thing on your podcast host, you're like 1,236. I said, yeah, isn't that great? What do you mean that's great? I said, yeah, I'm thrilled. We're listed there. We're on that list. They said, well, don't you want to be like them, top 10? I said, no, I don't care about being in top 10. This isn't, AM radio anymore. All I care about is people wanting to listen to the podcast. And I was hoping, listen, when I started this thing, I was hoping if I could get 10, 15 firefighters to listen to it, it would be a big success. And then 2.5, 3 years later, we have listeners in 42 countries. I never put it out in other countries. It just kind of grew its own legs through the podcast, all the platforms. But I never expected that, and I was never looking for that. I just wanted to tell a story about something that I loved very much. And since I only had a little bit of time, I tried to find the people who could tell the story better than me. And my job was just, like you said, and a local chief of training saw my post on LinkedIn, and he accepted my invitation. And I said, just think of it as 2 firefighters sitting at the kitchen table, just shooting the breeze about fire stuff. And, hopefully that's going to be okay with him, because that's the way I try to do it. And you guys know that. And you took the exact same approach with Make Do. Let's just talk about stuff that we really love to do, which is being firefighters. And that entails a whole lot. And I think that's probably where your success comes from, is that there aren't any egos. Although you both are entitled, because of what you've done in your careers, to have an ego, but you don't. Sean and Nick, as you both said at the outset, this is about family first, and the passion that we have to protect our communities is second. And everything else comes after those 2. And I'm happy to live that way. And I'm the same way. I wasn't out to make a fortune. I wasn't out to I've worked in big studios before, outfitted radio studios, but I didn't need that for this. It's just me and my guests. And all you have to do is be able to record it, edit it, and get it put out on the platforms. That's what it's about. And I hope people will listen, or they'll watch the video version of it. I hope they'll learn something from it. And if they do, then I'm just continuing my journey in education that's been the same over the last 60 years. Is just to teach to be a teacher, so that somebody learns something when I teach. It may not learn it all, and I sure can't learn it all, but I just like to teach, and that's my passion, and I love doing it. I still teach 2 adult classes per week, because they came to me and said, can you help us? We'd like to learn to do this in the synagogue. I said, yeah, sure. Well, how much does it cost? Nothing. Nothing? You're going to teach? I said, yeah, well, so what? That's what I love doing. So let's just learn together, and we'll go from there. And I think that you guys really embody that philosophy that I that I took on for myself as well. I'm nobody special in the fire service. I only had 8 years. I was just a snot-nosed, belly-crawling nozzle jockey for those 8 years. But I loved being a snot-nosed, belly-crawling nozzle jockey. You know, I didn't care how dirty the job was. I didn't care how difficult it was. If I was tapped by the chief or the captain, they wanted me to do something, I did what they wanted me to do because they picked me to do something. And that was my job. And I loved it. I didn't care if I had changed the oil and it was a practical joke and I had undid the nut and my face was right under the pan when I did it. And that was one of my my baptisms of fire, so to speak. And I coughed and, I got a little irate and then I just started laughing my head off because it was just being guys, just having a good time in the firehouse. So I love it. And I think that you guys, I don't know, I see you growing the same way, that you have that same passion, that love for what you're doing, love for family first, and love this job that we do. Not always easy, and certainly not always fun, but we do what we need to do because this is what we love doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say this, the minute that I wake up or the day that I wake up and I don't enjoy this job anymore and I tell myself I don't want to do this, I'm gone. I don't care how far into my career that is. That's it. That's where I stop because I think some of the problems we have and it is stemmed from people who are just staying when they don't want to, right? For whatever reasons. So I don't care about the pension. I don't care about that stuff. Like that stuff is so minute in the grand scheme of things. There's other great paying jobs out there that give you great benefits and a pension package of some sort. So it's never been about any of that stuff. I didn't join the fire service for any of that stuff. I didn't start a training company or do any of that stuff for any other reason other than I just really love this job. And I like to share with people what I've learned along the way. So it's really just about helping people step over the holes that I've stepped in, right? And you'll never know it all. That's impossible. And just that journey of knowing like I thought I was pretty good, but I'm really not as good as I think, right? And staying humble and realizing like, yeah, I could do this job for 40 years and there's going to always be things that I need to fix, right? It is what it is. So I tell everybody like the minute that becomes you or you don't desire to do this anymore, just stop, right? Like you don't get to play sports at a high level, right, without doing the things that is required of you to be there. So like the minute, like my friend Rob Ramirez says, like anytime you play baseball, like the person pitching that ball knows that they have to throw this ball at a certain speed over this plate every single time. And the minute they wake up and they decide that they don't want to do that, guess what they don't do anymore? They don't pitch. They probably don't play. So I would just encourage other people to have those open conversations with yourself. And, if you don't love this job, there's a reason why. Either find that spark again or have that realization like maybe your time has sailed and the fire service is in good hands. There's a lot of people that love the job and they just want to leave it better than they found it. Let those people do that.
Yeah, that's great. I don't know if you guys, hopefully you caught over the last summer, the Dick Wolf's new show, LA County Fire and EMS and Rescue. And I didn't like another fire show that's on a network by that producer, but I had to give him credit that this is today, those 7 episodes were today's version of Emergency that I watched back 50 years ago, that before I even knew I was going to wind up in the fire service, but I loved what I was seeing them do. I'd gone through all the Red Cross stuff growing up, every class I could take, I got certified in, but I never thought about being a firefighter. But I loved learning and watching them, what they were doing. And to me, it was a whole different side of fire and what was coming out as EMS in those days. And I think that to have the courage that you just talked about, Sean, as my dad told me, he goes, you got to look in that mirror, because that person in the mirror knows every single secret, every single urge, everything that you have inside of you. And if you don't like what you're doing, and that person tells you that you just don't like it anymore, then you got to listen to him or her. You have to, that's the real you is inside that mirror, not the fancy airs that you walk around strutting around thinking that's you. That's not you. You're that person in the mirror, and you have to be honest with yourself. And you know what? That was a life lesson he gave me my first year in college, and it was one of the best lessons I ever had in my life.
Oh yeah, absolutely. What do you got, Nick? You're sitting over there all
Yeah.
quiet.
No, I'm just
Light
enjoying the
music.
conversation, man. Enjoying it.
Well, I really have to say, guys, this has been so. I'm so happy that I invite you back. I'm so glad you guys were able to come back. I've watched as much as I can what you guys have been doing since you flew the nest, to use the phrase, and I couldn't be prouder. Couldn't be prouder, because
Thank you.
that passion,
Thanks.
that love, that's what we're missing too often today. As you said, Sean, people are doing the job because it's a job. Well, there are tons of jobs out there. Find the one that gives you that feeling in here. And as the old saying goes, find the job you love and you never work a day in your life. Okay. We have tough days. You can't take that away. That's the reality of this, what we do. But that doesn't mean we love the job any less. It just means that was a tough day and a tough call. But it doesn't mean it takes away from our love of what we're doing. And the passion that you guys do, first learning to the best of your abilities over your years of doing it, and then both of you start teaching from what you've learned to try to share that with others. And then the conferences and teaching at national conferences in the North Florida Fire Expo, Nick, they made so much sense after the Great Florida Fire School. They really did, because you've been able to continue with it since you started it. I mean, to me, that shows the success of the idea that you came up with, which was, can't always, it's not all just South Florida. We got a lot of people here in the Panhandle and in the bordering states that could learn a lot if we just keep a basic, nice firefighting conference. As you said, basic blue-collar firefighting conference. And that's what you've done. And the fact that you're going into your 5th year is proof of the success, that there are people looking for that. They want to just, hey, I just want to go with people just like me, and I want to learn with them. And if we can get more educators, more presenters, more teachers who take that attitude that I just want to share. That's all I want to do. I don't need a name. I don't need initials after my name from some big university. I just want to say, hey, I taught at this class at this conference, and I got a whole bunch of good things, good comments back. That's all the fulfillment you guys need, because that's all you care about. You don't care about anything else, about just sharing your knowledge and helping others learn. And you are true educators to do that. True educators. And I'm so proud.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, I
Well,
appreciate those words for sure.
yeah. Listen, what you did for the motto, we can't even thank you enough for that, man. And it was like, by the way, I got to say, I mean, it wasn't like it took 3 days. I just put it out there. And, what do you think for a motto for the nonprofit? And like an hour later, I get an email from Sean. What about this? One family, one mission, first responders helping each other. Sold. we were in it. And Andy loves it. Nick Higgins loves it. The people we've shared it with love it. And the families we share it with love it as well. Loves it well. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking time from these schedules. I know took you away from family time. Oh, one from family time and one for a little outdoor time. But funny said, well, why do you like hunting so much if you can't do it? I said there are lots of things I can't do, but I still love it. I said I admire people who live off the land and they're ethical hunters, and we need that because otherwise our animal populations get out of control and everything goes topsy turvy. So if people are ethical, I can't do it because of my beliefs, but I'm proud to know people who are ethical hunters and help live off the land. And so to me, matter of fact, I said the other night after watching one of the Warden shows, I said, it's got to be, I said, what would life be like if we didn't live in a big city? We lived in a smaller community, maybe 1,000 people, 1,200, 1,500 people, where people know each other, care about each other for the most part. I said, I wonder if that life would have been different these last 10, 15, 20 years, because of that. So I love what I see, stuff like that. And I love seeing kids, like I'm a fisher. I love to fish. So I love seeing kids fishing. I love the little kid with a little baby rod. And, I think that's great too. So whatever we do to keep ourselves well-rounded and well-grounded in our lives, I think is always a positive step.
To the family thing, man, I mean, this country would be in a lot better shape, I think, if more kids spent time on the water, in the woods, outside than in front of TVs and screens all day. I mean, that's just my observation, my opinion. But I think that, teaching kids how to be resourceful and do things on their own is huge. And, teaching them to be responsible and appreciate the things they got, being out in nature.
Yeah,
so it's a pretty good thing. So I, got to take my my daughter out hunting for the youth hunt a few weeks ago, and it's awesome. We didn't get anything, but it was nice to sit with her, and my little guy got to be with me last year, and we got a deer, and so those memories are things that they'll carry with them.
Oh yeah,
forever. And I think as I've gotten older, we realize that your time with your kids is obviously limited before they get older and move out and do their own thing. So try to make as many memories as possible. And, I look at it like this. I mean, I want to spend my money on experiences over stuff, because stuff wears out, gets thrown away. At the end of the day, they don't remember the stuff. They remember the way that they felt having those experiences and learning and growing and being together as a family. So, I think that's a good way to end the show, on a family note. So take care of your families, both at home and at the firehouse.
Absolutely. That's a great way to end it. Gentlemen, thanks again. Really appreciate it. Stay safe, stay well. Don't be strangers, stay in touch. Like I said, I think this might be the last season. I thought last season was going to be the last season because I thought my wife was going to retire, but she decided not to. So I said, what do I do now if she's going back to work? So
got to keep going.
I got to keep going and keep, like the bunny. I just got to keep on running and running and running. Guys, it's great to see you guys again and have you back. It really is.
Good to see you, Steve.
All right, you guys stay safe and stay well. Folks, if you're watching the video, this will be the end of the video. If you're listening to the audio, well, we'll have a break, and then we'll be back with a couple of more segments with some other stuff coming up. But to all of you who've joined us today, whether you've been watching it on our YouTube channel or listening to it on your podcast platform, thank you very much for tuning in. We appreciate it. You stay safe, stay well, and let's remember to take care of each other, and let's make sure everyone goes home. Take care, and we'll see you next week. Our guest will be Dr. Gamali Albert, who is a firefighter in, I believe, Howard County in Maryland. He's been with us before. He's also Coast Guard reserveman. Also coming up will be Peter Matthews, the editor-in-chief of Firehouse Magazine, and finally, after a lot of trying, I'm proud to say we're going to be bringing on Commissioner Adam Teal of the Philadelphia Fire Department in a couple of weeks. And I'm really looking forward to that and sharing his wisdom, his knowledge and experience with all of you. So stay safe, stay well, everybody, and we'll see you very soon. Bye-bye now.